Well, hello, welcome to the Skillwork Forum. I'm Tim. Generally, I'm joined with my partner, Brett. On these podcasts, we talk about manufacturing, skilled trades, things around the skilled trades. But we're going to have a series of 3 podcasts that a little bit of a departure from what we normally talk about. We're going to bring in 3 organizations, really heroes in our local community that give back, that support various needs across our community, the heartland, where we call home here. And we're hoping that it inspires you and your organizations and gives you some ideas on how you might be able to get involved financially or with your employees to be able to really do things maybe above and beyond what we normally think about in running our businesses. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share these podcasts with you. Well, hello and welcome again to the Skillwork Forum. My name's Tim, as always, joined with my partner, Brett, and we have a special guest with us today. We are in the presence of Major Scott, and let me get this name right, Shelbourne. We're calling Major Scott, the Salvation Army. A little bit different flow today for the Skillwork Forum. Usually on this podcast, we talk about manufacturing issues, staffing issues, things really surrounding the skilled trades. That's really the emphasis of this podcast. But today, this is the first in a series we're going to do, highlighting some of the partners in the community that we like to support because we believe in your mission and aligns with what we want to do. So we want to kind of platform that today. So Major Scott, you've been with the Salvation Army for over 2 decades now.
Over 2 decades now, yeah.
Yeah. Prior to that, spent some time in the military, National Guard, and had a civilian job before you answered the call, and it is a calling, we'll kind of get into that, to join the Salvation Army. And now you are the Divisional Commander for the Western Division of the Salvation Army. So you're responsible, even though headquartered in Omaha, responsible for Nebraska, South Dakota, and Iowa.
Correct.
You've been married to your wife, Jolinda, for 31 years, 4 married children, 10 grandkids. So you've outdone Brett and I. We're playing catch up. Yeah. So, man, welcome to the Skillwork Forum. It's such a pleasure to have you here. We love what the Salvation Army does.
This is a wonderful opportunity to just talk about life and things going on at the Salvation Army.
100%.
Yeah, we're excited. So, well, thanks for joining us. So, all of us know, in general, the Salvation Army, but maybe give us a little history lesson. And then, obviously we know it as a charity organization, but what's the military tie-in as well?
It really happened way back in the 1800s. So the Salvation Army started in London, England, with William and Catherine Booth, and they were Methodists, what was called in the time itinerant preachers. So they're, in this modern age, we'd call them traveling evangelists. And they really didn't want to take on a permanent church, but they really saw the down and out in London. And William Booth's early years, he was studying to be a pawnbroker. He was interning to do that as an apprentice. And he saw people selling the tools of their trade just to meet their basic needs for their families. And that really crushed his spirit. So as he became a minister, he started something called the Christian Mission. And his object was to get people out of, if they were addicted to alcohol, women in prostitution, things like that, just to get them back to a state of well-being, get them to a point where they could understand that there's a God who loves them, and connect them back to the churches they grew up with. And his motto at the time, which still works with the Salvation Army, was soup, soap, and salvation. And that was, if you got somebody a full belly and you got them cleaned up physically and mentally, then they could understand that there is a God who loves them. And that still motivates the Salvation Army today. And so at a certain point in time, as they're getting incorporated in London, they were doing something called the deed poll, which is kind of incorporation papers in London. And they said, well, we're a volunteer army. And one of William Booth's sons said, well, I'm not a volunteer, I'm a regular. And so they changed the name right there to the Salvation Army, and that's what stuck. And the militaristic side of that, through those early years of the Salvation Army, was to win the world for Jesus, to take on sin as a war, the sin and poverty that so often strikes humankind. And so that war mantra was also facilitated after World War I, when the Salvation Army got involved there, and all of the men coming back from the war as a Salvation Army soldier wanted to still maintain that kind of code that the military kind of has. So they they kind of developed their own uniforms, which evolved into the uniform we wear today. And so that period of time was kind of unique in history because, of course, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Great Britain still had its fingers all over the world. And because of that, the Salvation Army was able to spread to India and all the other places that Great Britain kind of had colonies and things like that. So the Salvation Army used the ties that Great Britain had all over the world to kind of take on the world and to just fight against sin and poverty everywhere. And so now we're in over 130 countries worldwide officially, many others unofficially because the government won't recognize the Salvation Army as a church or a non-government or organization, NGO. So that's just kind of the brief history. Of course, later on in the 1800s, the Salvation Army come over to the United States and spread also throughout the state. So just a beautiful organization, a rich history to be a part of.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I didn't know any of that.
That's really interesting. So you guys are really mission focused, obviously. And, you talk all the way back to the beginning. So a lot of organizations, especially faith-based organizations, talk about it's more of a calling than a vocation. And we talked in your bio that you were called into the Salvation Army. What does that mean? Can you elaborate on that so people maybe not familiar with that sort of vernacular? And do you feel like most of the people that you work with have that sense of calling?
Absolutely. Now, it's either a calling to be like an officer like myself or just that kind of value alignment that God has given them with what our mission in the Salvation Army is. So a lot of our employees feel called to work for the Army because intrinsically in who they are and the Spirit is calling them to give to their neighbor and fellow man in a certain way, and they find that call fulfilled through working for the Salvation Army. For me, my early professional life, I worked for a company here in Omaha that was headquartered in Minneapolis called Medical Technologies at the time. That the names changed over time. I'm not familiar with what it is now, but we serviced hearing test equipment and audiometers and noise dosimeters at factories and things like that. So I was one of the technicians that went and worked on that. I was also serving in the Air National Guard at the time as a imagery interpreter specialist. Back then the Nebraska Air Guard flew F-4s, the KC-135s now. But anyway, I was one of the guys that looked at the film the RF-4Cs would bring back in the reconnaissance effort. And so during that time, I was going to college, met my wife. She introduced me, and a fraternity brother, actually. I was in fraternity at UNO. They introduced me to the Salvation Army, not just as a social service organization, but also as a church. So we have 4 churches in the Omaha metro area. And I just got connected with that. So I'm doing all my stuff, and because of the work I was doing with audio at the time, the Corps officer needed somebody to run their sound system in the chapel. And so I said, well, sure, I'll do that. It's a good way to give back, So I started doing that and helping out with other programs and stuff. And I go back, so in those moments, I go way back to when I was a little kid. I always felt there was something that God had a purpose for me, a plan for me. So I always had this kernel of searching out whatever this feeling I had inside, and nothing in my professional career that I was doing totally connected with that. But giving back to the Salvation Army in the audio, and I guess I did it well. They would invite me out to do it for some of their large divisional youth events and things like that. And it was at one of those events that somebody was on stage asking people, if God's calling you to be an Army officer, then you need to respond now. And I'm back there. I mean, this is back before all the video systems and stuff. We got slide projectors that we're trying to run. We've got so we got video or screens up with 3 slide projectors trying to run things and make it look kind of like video. And we did have an old VHS, video camera, the big mods that used to sit on your shoulder. We had one of those set up to record everything. Anyway, I'm in the midst of all that. There's a band playing. I'm running the big soundboard, and I just leave all that and walk forward. And so it was in that moment that I felt all of a sudden right where God wanted me to be, and that kernel that when I was a kid that just started in my life that said God had a purpose for me, all of a sudden was totally connected. And I felt like I just stepped into a bright light And and so there, everything just fell into place, and the road has been that road ever since. And so so I had to go home and tell my wife. So in the Salvation Army, you have, if you're going to be an officer, your wife needs to be an officer too, because you go into it as a unit. And so I had to go home and tell my wife, hey, I think I need to quit my career and become a Salvation Army officer. She told me right then that I should get a divorce because she wasn't going to do that. But exactly a year later, at the same style of event where I was doing everything, she went forward.
Wow.
And I watched her go forward, and and then ever since we've been on this track.
Wow.
So,
that's
amazing.
a great description, really, of what it feels like to be called into something bigger than yourself and to get that confirmation that you're where you're supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
love that. Brett and I talk a lot about, though it's maybe a different vein than Salvation Army, we felt called.
Mm-hmm.
We use that language. We felt called to start this business too.
Yeah.
And very much the same kind of feeling.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, when it's clear when something, it's one thing when you're striving to do something in your own power, and I've done that, most of my life, and so, but there's a definite difference when you truly know this is something bigger than me, that I'm being called to steward, and it's a different kind of a taking. So, in your mind, what's now you've been doing this, obviously for many years, and so, what do you think is the most important service that the Salvation Army provides, and maybe even here, locally, maybe something that you're super proud of that you guys are doing?
Yeah, worldwide, the Salvation Army tries to do its best for the community in which we are placed. So we always do what we call needs assessments over time, every couple of years, to try to formulate the best services for every community we're in. Now, it does look similar almost worldwide in a lot of situations. We have all of our character building activities, both for kids and adults. And we feed a lot of people. We serve a lot of folks that are out on the streets. We have shelters, all those kind of things. So in every community, it looks a little different, but it looks a lot the same as well. Locally here in the Omaha metro area, I think one of the services that we provide that is kind of under the radar a little bit for the public is called mental health respite. We know that there's a huge need for mental health services all across our country. And these mental health respite is somebody that's in a mental health crisis. We give them a space and we provide counseling and we come along beside them. Sometimes addiction recovery services help get them connected back with counselors and mental health professionals to help get them back to a sustainable living situation. Mm-hmm. And so we provide that service, but it's not one that's easily describable in a sentence out to the community when we're trying to raise funds through the Tree of Lights campaign and such. But I think it's very important that program has a waiting list sometimes, which is unfortunate because when people are in mental health crisis, they need right away.
Yeah.
They need help right away. So, but I think it's one of the more important ones that we do. And again, it's one that kind of flies under the radar a little bit, but it is critical. And we have many people every day that we're housing in that program and taking care of them to make sure that they don't get to a point where they might do something drastic or hurt others. Yeah. And so I'm very proud of that program and thankful for the staff that come along beside these people and the way that we're able to connect them in with not only other Salvation Army services, but also services throughout the community.
Yeah, it's really good.
Is the skilled labor shortage hurting your company's bottom line? Skillwork is the premier staffing agency focusing exclusively on skilled labor. Our team of highly skilled workers augments your existing teams for elevated impact and decreased downtime. Partnering with hundreds of facilities in more than 30 states, we deploy our traveling industrial technicians to work for you on a contract basis. Our philosophy is simple: to honor God in all we do, bring respect back to the skilled trades, and positively impact those around us. For more information on how Skillwork can deliver the top labor talent you need, visit skillwork.com or call us at 402-447-7058. Call us today to see how Skillwork can work for you.
Most of us think along those lines of what you guys do in the visibility in the community. I would be willing to bet that most people think of Salvation Army, they think of bell ringers.
Yeah.
Christmas time bell ringers, the kettle, dropping that in. It's been going on since forever, well before our time, but I remember it. And, that's kind of a Christmas time, but you guys have year-round needs. I went to a fundraiser recently, and just the breadth of support and services that you guys provide, from very practical daily things to kids needing stuff for school to outreaches for, camps for kids, things like that. But what are some other year-round needs that you have, and how can a business or somebody out there that's in a business that's maybe this time of year looking for, trying to support an organization, what are your year-round needs, and how might we be able to help?
Yeah, we have various programs that meet every age group, from moms that are pregnant all the way to senior adults. And so if there is a way that somebody or a business likes to give back to the community, I guarantee you the Salvation Army is doing that in some form. One of the great ways, especially through the winter months, for a company or individuals get involved is in our Winter Night Watch program, where we take our emergency disaster canteens out on the streets, and we find people that are living outside during the cold winter months, and we try to connect them first off with services. We feed them a hot meal, and our canteens have hats, gloves, socks, coats to try to keep these people warm and safe in the midst of their current living condition. And that program goes from November all the way into early part of March every winter. And so there's tons of opportunities for people to get involved and to give back to their fellow man through that program. And it's everybody who goes out on our canteens and is meeting these people. And some of the people we feed are just barely making by, maybe in an apartment that's nearby or something like that. And the food that we're giving them helps them stay in their home because they're able to defer those costs to pay their rent that month. And that just goes back into another program at our Borough Center, especially on Military Ave in Central Omaha, where we feed hundreds of people every week. We give them food. We have what we call a client choice pantry, where we put food on shelves. A lot of that food is donated, another way people can give back to the Salvation Army. And we allow people to go through and pick the food that's appropriate for their family. And they're able to take a lot of food away to go feed their families. But again, that's deferring costs from other things. We know inflation has just wrecked family budgets right now. And so any way that we can give into a family's life, we're really deferring costs to help them stay sustainable in their current living situation. But that's a great way. We have tons of volunteers that go there that walk around with the families to help them choose food. We also have volunteers that come in for our youth programs at all four of our main metro area locations: the Kroc Center, Omaha Citadel, it's at 38th and Cumming, and the Omaha North Core, as well as Council Bluffs. We have archery programs going on, soccer, all kinds of things for the youth programs. We teach them life skills, all kinds of stuff where people can pour into the lives of youth. And then also at 38th and Cumming, we have our senior housing, which is called Booth Manor, where we have over 100 seniors living in that facility. And we do all kinds of activities for them that we invite volunteers to come in and help give back to that age group. So again, there's almost limitless possibilities for a company to support financially, support with tangible items like food. We have our coat drive every year that's going on right now. Right now we're doing hoodies to try to collect, which will go out on our Winter Night Watch canteens. Or people can just give their time. And specifically, you mentioned the Red Kettle. Of course, people can volunteer at salarmy.org, and there's a link there to go to the site where people can register to ring to sign up to volunteering at a kettle. So if you can't give financially, you can give tangible items, or you can give your time. And the Salvation Army is a great way to do that.
That's great. And so companies out there, they can, hey, we can give financial support. That's always needed. But if you're looking to get your employees engaged in something,
absolutely.
Any of your Salvation Army, even if you're not, you're probably outside our local area, you could reach out to your local Salvation.
Yeah, we do it worldwide. So
it's great.
Yeah, no, it's great. Well, kind of along that, vein, obviously, like we've talked about the bell ringing, and I think you call it the Red Kettle, and there's also the tree.
Yeah.
What do you call that?
The Tree of Lights.
Tree of Lights. There you go. And so we see those, and I assume most of those are individuals giving, you know, and I'm sure, I don't know what portion comes from individuals, but is there do you have some examples of some business partnerships, and do you guys seek partnerships with businesses that support the Salvation Army?
Yeah, it happens all the time, and it's a beautiful thing. So like our Tree of Lights here in Omaha at 90th and Dodge,
Yep.
you know, of course, that's right on American National Bank's property, and they are wonderful partners with us in allowing that tree to be there. 75-foot tree. It's one of the largest in the Midwest. And if you've ever, you know, driven through Omaha, you see that tree many miles away, right? Just a beautiful thing. And they allow us to do our what we call our Tree of Lights kickoff, Red Kettle kickoff there in their parking lot. And that's all underwritten by them. You know, it's a wonderful corporate partnership. Our advisory board represents many of the corporate heads around the Omaha metro area, but in all of our communities, we have great advisory board members that give us great connecting points. We also have great connecting points with Omaha area service clubs and service clubs throughout the country. And so in any of those fashions, companies can get involved, service clubs can get involved and make a difference. Like this year, we got involved, he's retired now, but Willie Thiessen, you know, who started Godfathers, just stepped in like we were doing backpacks. And he just got so moved by giving back. He went into Costco and like bought all of their backpacks. And then he's like, well, we can't have these backpacks given to kids empty. So he went and bought all the supplies to stick in the backpacks. And I was there when he was doing it. He had a box truck just full of backpacks that we were able to unload.
That's great.
You know, and put, so those kind of connecting points, they're making a huge difference in people's lives. And the Salvation Army, in all of our fundraising, we could never provide it all. But these corporate partnerships where either the corporations are sponsoring a Red Kettle at their site, or they sponsor volunteering rigging for an entire day at a site, which service clubs do as well. Every hour that somebody's out volunteering that way is equal to about $50 coming back to the Salvation Army. And so
That's great.
People will never know this side of heaven, the impact they're having by the volunteering, these connecting points, and the way that they give back through partnering with and in Christian mission with the Salvation Army.
That's great. Yeah, I think a culture of giving, a culture of compassion. A lot of companies talk about that, and it's important. I think sometimes you just don't know. How do you think you foster a culture of giving back in an organization? What would you say to an organization that's kind of, you know, thinking about this? And even, you know, let's be frank and open. There's a spiritual element, faith-based element to Salvation Army. Unashamedly, you know, that's your roots, and you're trying to reach people for eternity as well. And some companies are like, well, I don't know if we want to. You know, we can't do that, or we can't participate in that because we don't want to offend people. What would you say to a company about fostering, even if it's not Salvation Army, just this heartbeat of giving back to the community?
Well, first, I always remind people the Salvation Army is a Christian organization where we have our church services and we do everything in the name of Jesus. But what I say is we don't overtly proselytize until somebody wants us to talk to them about that. So most of the services that we do in the name of Jesus in word and deed, but we don't put any limitations on who comes into our facilities and are requested for help. We meet human needs, it's in our mission statements, without discrimination. And so we don't discriminate about anything, you know, whether it's gender, whether it's, you know, we don't often even ask people to qualify their need. If they're in need and we can help or connect them with somebody to help, we do that first and foremost. It's the soup, soap, and salvation model. And eventually they may come to us and request more spiritual care, and then we're able to provide that. And that's the difference between the Salvation Army and a lot of other organizations, is we have that component that we're able to provide the truly holistic care for people. We care for their physical and mental needs. And at some point in time, if they want somebody to come along beside them and pray for them, or they've got questions, we're there to answer them. It also happens with our emergency disaster service. You know, down in Florida, Florida's had a very terrible month. And we have all kinds of units. We have some folks from our area that are down there right now serving people. But we don't go in and say, you can't have food from our canteen unless We just serve the people indiscriminately, and then we're there for their emotional and spiritual care as well. And so for corporations, first and foremost, I want everybody to know that when you partner with the Salvation Army, you're truly partnering to make sure that people's basic needs are met. But with the knowledge that we do have this other component, this kernel of truth that we want to give people. Yeah. Now, to foster it in your company, I just encourage leaders to be that. Me and my own position, where I'm the leader of a 3-state area for the Salvation Army, I realized as I was prepping to come into this role, as the Salvation Army said, in a few months, we're going to transition you into this role. So, I started reading some books, and what I found in a lot of leadership books really is that culture is changed from the top down. Now, from the bottom up, the employees will say, we want to be involved in this and we want to be involved in that. But if to truly foster the spirit of giving in a corporation or a company, you need both levels, right? You need the folks at the bottom level to say, yes, we want to give back somehow and we want to do it with our company. But you also need leadership to say, this is the right thing to do, and we're gonna step into this. And so you need both ends of the spectrum, and then everything else will flow into the middle. So we need leaders to be cultural change agents for their companies, their corporations, and to allow people to live out what they're feeling intrinsically on how their company should give back.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. And so it's been great having you on. Just learn a lot more. I'm curious, so I'm a numbers guy. So any fun facts on, how many meals do you guys serve a day? How many volunteers, do you have? You're just such a much vaster organization that I think sometimes, we realize how much the organization is doing, and obviously in this area specifically. But.
Yeah, well, in the Omaha metro area, we have a ratio of about 20-to-1 hours between volunteers and staff. So for every 1 hour we have staff members doing something, we actually depend on about 20 hours of volunteering to come behind that. And that allows us to leverage every dollar that comes in, in a wonderful way. We're still, I think last year after our last external audit, we were at 83.5 cents of every dollar given goes into direct service to others, when you take the administrative costs and the fundraising costs out of it. So we get a lot of things gratis to make between volunteer time and also just marketing and things like that. Folks and companies are very generous with us. Like local TV stations give us a lot of airtime. And like you guys right now, this is a wonderful gift to the Salvation Army, this time on this podcast. And it's a blessing. We serve, when you include the folks who are staying in Salvation Army facilities, as well as the meals that we put out, and the food boxes that we give out. We're giving out somewhere between 500 and 1,000 meals a day.
Wow.
And, and
that's just here in this
That's just
one
in the Omaha metro area.
So that's multiplied by dozens and dozens.
Yeah, when you go across the country, it's millions. Yeah. And when you include what's going on, like in areas where there's emergency disaster service going on, where people are without power and all that kind of stuff, and our canteens are rolling and giving out meals. You're talking millions of meals every day that the Salvation Army is giving out and touching lives through that. And again, that's all happening with minimal staffing, but with a huge impetus of volunteers that come behind us and are value aligned and mission aligned with us to make sure people are taken care of.
Well, it's a great organization, and I'm glad we were able to have a small spotlight shed on what your organization does. I got a chance to hear a testimony from somebody who, received services, were really in a bad way, ultimately started volunteering, giving their time, now part of the organization. And that restoration of humans is a really important thing, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So we applaud what you do. And we encourage you out there, if you're looking for an organization to get behind, this is one that you can do and feel really good about, and get your employees involved, to get out and volunteer for a day or multiple days during the holiday season. Really grateful, Major Scott, to have you on the Skillwork Forum. And thank you all for listening to us, and we hope this inspires you to think about giving back to your organization, even in times that we're facing economic headwinds. giving is such an amazing way to build the culture of your company. So our company, Skillwork, we exist to try to provide opportunity for great skill workers across the country. We'd love to talk to you if you find yourself in need for that. And also maybe share a little bit about our culture and how we believe that honoring God is core to who we are and what we do as well. So thank you for joining us on the Skillwork Forum. If you like this podcast, you'd like to hear more content, go out and check us out on Spotify or YouTube. Like our podcast, it helps us. Or if you have any ideas for content, we'd love to hear that as well. So next time, God bless.
This is Brett Elliott, CEO and co-founder at Skillwork. Prior to starting Skillwork, I spent over 30 years in the food manufacturing space. From literally starting out cleaning the restrooms to becoming the maintenance manager, then the plant manager, to eventually becoming the president and owner, I've seen the manufacturing world from many perspectives. And like many of you, I've seen firsthand the growing need for higher skilled workers, while at the same time experiencing the shortage of this skilled talent. I started Skillwork to address that need. I knew the headhunter and the local temp agency models were not the solution. If you're experiencing the same shortage of talent at your facility, we would love to connect you with our team. Give us a call at 402-447-7058 or visit us online at skillwork.com.